I received a communication this week from a gentleman on behalf of a lady. This was a lady who tried to do the UCC PPSA here in Canada. She tried to create a bond with the IRS, and she tried to discharge her mortgage. Now, she did this not because she's greedy. She did this because she understands that the banks are creating electronical accounts, and all money in Canada is debt accounts and backed by debt, and she didn't want to be part of this anymore because she understands that by having debt, then she's hurting her fellow brother and sister. And if you don't understand that that's exactly what you're doing, then I suggest that you learn the banking system and exactly what's going on. Because when you go to the bank and you ask for a 10, a 20, or even a $200,000 loan, the bank will create that through a promissory note and your signature. However, the interest that the bank asks you to pay back, they do not create. All these loans that they are creating every day, they do not create the interest with it. So here's a quick question for you. If they do not create the interest, where is the interest coming from? If it has to be taken from the global amount that is out there, that means someone will not be able to acquire the interest in order to pay for their loans. That means someone will be losing their property by an operation or a procedure of law. And that's what we are having a part of. That's what we are touching and building when we take loans and we take mortgages from the bank. We are helping to bring down our fellow brother and sister. We don't do it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose when I was using this system, but that's how they've done it. That's how they've created it. When you really understand what's going on, that's what's happening. When you take a loan, there's no interest that's created with that loan, and that interest has to come from the global amounts. That means the other fellow who's down the road, who also has to find interest, you're taking from him. And one of you two will not be able to make your bills. Now this lady tried to discharge her house. It didn't work on that private bond. It's not an operation that's working here in Quebec or in Canada. And I understand why. I'm saying it's because there's a notwithstanding clause. Nevertheless, they produced a judgment against her. It's an arbitrary judgment against her. And they're telling her, and they're saying in this judgment that she has to leave her house within 15 days from the date of this judgment. Now, for those who think that Canada is a wonderful place to live, how would you like to be in this situation? How would you like to have take a mortgage and you can't afford to pay your mortgage? And you approach the bank and you say to the bank, listen, I can't afford, can you help me? And they kick you to the curb. And then you continue not to be able to pay for your mortgage, so they take you to court. And they get a judgment against you. And they say in 15 days you have to leave your house. All your worldly possessions, you must go with you. Your family, your children must go with you. This is horrible. And this is law. And this is what they call justice. It is not law. It is not justice for the people or for the men and women or for the humans. It is justice for the corporations. It is a system that has been constructed on behalf of the corporations. But you do not have to let it beat you up. And you do not have to give in to what's going on. So in Article 7 of that judgment, if I just translate it in English here, it says that they tried to use a registered private set-off bond for the amount of $500,000. And they said that they tried to use it with the Uniform Commercial Code that's applicable in the United States. Article 9 and 10 here, it says that after verifying the evidence and the information that the lady deposited, that they're rejecting the request. And they're saying that no, it doesn't work. There's no bond. It's not enforceable here in Canada. And we're rejecting this. And we're going to judge you now. One thing to note here, though, is this is an official documentation. It is from the Superior Court of Quebec. And did you notice that they did admit that the set-off bond is something that does indeed work in America? So they just gave away a huge piece of information on this judgment, because they did say that they're trying to use this set-off bond that is in operation in America and works in America but has no function here. So thank you for that little piece of official information there, Mr. Judge. Now here's the order of the day, and it's not bacon and eggs with toast. It's definitely an arbitrary order, and it says that they order the expulsion of those who are living in the place. And they order it without delay. After these 15 days, they're to go. And then they say, with all costs, meaning you pay all the court costs and everything else on top of that. So not only are they trying to evict them from their own personal property, that the human has the right under Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms, and under the Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, Article 11, have a right to housing, so they will be invoking that right if they continue to push this. Nevertheless, they say, we're going to kick you out, and you're going to pay for all these costs. So, yeah, well, good luck with enforcing that. So this is the kind of garbage, this is the kind of tribulation, this is the kind of sorrows, this is the kind of problems that they're creating for the men and women in Canada through their erected systems, if you will. Now, I know it's Friday and it's really important because there's hockey games going on and there's new movies being released and there's the latest video games to buy and the latest clothing to buy. So, you know, we have time to entertain ourselves and spend our money, but to learn our rights, to help our families, to help our loved ones, who, God forbid, should ever be put in any of these situations. And they're coming, because the housing bubble, the crash is coming. So you're going to see those around you start to be affected if they don't know how to defend themselves. This system is engaging you to actively cause you loss and damage. It's been created to hurt you and steal from you. Just by watching all these videos, you see that they've stripped us of our inalienable rights, our intrinsic rights. And they did it all through ignorance. So those who think that, hey, this system is great and it's here to help me and do good for me, you're under a delusion. I'm sorry to say that. I know it may be better than the country that you came from, but it is not a representation of what life should be. It's not a representation of how we, as men and women, should be expressing ourselves in liberty and freedom. Very controlled. Not only that, we're stolen from through this whole process. And it's not even applicable only to homes. It works in all ways. Black Laws, Edition 7, Arbitrary. Depending on individual discretion. Specific, determined by a judge. Determined by a judge. Black Laws, Edition 5, Arbitrary. Means in an arbitrary manner, as fixed or done capriciously or at pleasure, without adequate determining principle, not founded in the nature of things, non-rational, not done or acting according to reason or judgment, depending on the will alone, absolutely in power, capriciously tyrannical. Black Laws, Edition 9, Arbitrary. Depending on individual discretion, specific, determined by a judge rather than by fixed rules, procedures, or law. So, determined by a judge. So the word arbitrary that we find often used, when we look in Black Laws, the older editions, it says that it's without adequate determining principle. That's pretty rough to state. And then it says not founded in the nature of things. Okay? Non-rational. Well, now it seems to be like saying that it doesn't make any sense. Like arbitrary, non-rational. It says absolutely in power. And notice the last word they use. Tyrannical. So they say that arbitrary power is an expression of tyrannical power. And it's without adequate determining principle. It's not based in common law. It's not based in principles that should be governing us. And it states, not founded in the nature of things. Now, I don't think it's talking about David Suzuki, his program, The Nature of Things. I think it's talking about common law. As we understand that common law flows from the nature of things, just from things that are. So, in the later editions of Black Law, they qualify the word more. They bring it down into a more understandable nature when you're seeking to see what it means. And it says arbitrary, and it says it means determined by a judge, depending on individual discretion. That's what arbitrary means. So, not only is it non-rational and tyrannical, but now in the future, in later on editions, they say that this non-rational and tyrannical power being exercised is determined by a judge, and it depends on an individual discretion. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Preamble. Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse, as a last resort, to rebellion against tyranny and oppression. Now notice that word, tyranny. That human rights should be protected by the rule of law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in the preamble, it states that for a man, as a last recourse, a man can rebel against tyranny and oppression in order that human rights be respected. That's something that you're allowed to do. Now, it says that a man has the right to rebel against tyranny. Did you notice that? They use the word tyranny. Now, if we go back into black laws and we see that arbitrary is describing tyranny, actions of tyranny. So then the law is teaching us that man or woman, the human, he can or she can rebel against arbitrary demands or arbitrary judgments or arbitrary interference in that human's life. It's very clearly expressed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the other covenants, as you will see. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference. Again, arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of law against such interference or attacks. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21. It states that nobody, everyone, you understand? Nobody has to accept this, but everyone is free from arbitrary interference upon their privacy, upon their family, upon their home, and upon their communications. So, if arbitrary means a judgment by a judge, and if Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedom says no one can be subjected to this arbitrary interference, these judgments from these judges upon their privacy, family, home, or communications, this is a right that we need to start waking up to and exercising and standing under. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 17. Everyone has the right to own property alone, as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. There it is again, arbitrarily. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 17. It states that everyone has the right to own property alone or in a public manner. In a public way, where you're being taxed and they're holding on to your property. Now it also states that everyone has the right not to have their property arbitrarily deprived from them. So again, you don't have to have your property arbitrarily deprived from you. Well, what does that really mean? Well, if someone's made a judgment against you, this is really something that is non-rational and is not based on proper foundation and law. Because if you really knew what was going on, everything out there is fictions. It's not living beings, flesh and blood like we are. And they're saying that you, in your actions, are damaging fictions, companies, and that these companies have the right to make claims against you. And the judge who sits and listens to these claims, he judges against you and condemns you to pay money. And he's arbitrarily removing your rights from you through all this action. But they don't have the right to be doing this. It's just that we don't understand what's going on. And we don't know how to stand up and protect ourselves from all this. You have the right not to be arbitrarily interfered with in your privacy, with your family, with your home, with every aspect of your life. People see a judgment from a judge with a signature on it and they shake in their boots. This is arbitrarily removing your freedoms and rights as a human being. And there is a way to defend against this and to get respected, not only respected, but to get damage for the fact that they would be willing to play this facade over you, and that they would be willing to place you in this situation, removing your intrinsic rights and arbitrarily stealing from you. So I don't think it's by accident when you start looking for the meaning of arbitrary, the definitions that start coming out, such as non-rational. Because when you attach it to what the bank does to someone, like the bank, who is a fiction, sues the person in these courts of laws before this arbitrary judge, and asks that their home be removed from the person because they haven't paid a consumer note that's not properly filled out anyways, nevertheless. And they ask the home be taken away. And the judge gives the judgment arbitrarily. He makes that decision. And the human with intrinsic rights nearly gets those things stripped away from them. If they don't come across the proper knowledge and understanding. And they use this arbitrary action to strip you of your rights. And that's what's going on. And everywhere where you have intrinsic rights in these codes and in these covenants, it clearly uses the word arbitrary. And it talks about the fact that they can't remove this from you arbitrarily. But yet, that is exactly what they are trying to do with the judgments from their judges, signing their John Hancock upon them. So the bank petitions the court. The fiction petitions another fiction and says that there's a flesh and blood human being, a man or a woman, that owes me an obligation. This obligation is false. It's created electronically, but nevertheless, I'm claiming that they owe me this obligation. Judge, would you be willing to hear this for me? And the judge says, yes, I will hear this for you. Bring the case to me. So then they'll send a summons, a request, to the one they are seeking to screw around with. Excuse my language, but that's basically what they're doing. So the bank goes to court and gets a judgment. We'll play this out. Gets a judgment. Oh, happy day for the bank. Happy, happy day. They got a judgment, which is a bill of exchange, by the way, but they got a judgment, and now they're going to try and repossess the house. So they're going to call up the bailiff, and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Bailiff, I have a judgment from the judge here, and we want you to go and repossess this property from this judgment. And the bailiff will say, okay, I'll take that case. How much you going to pay me? Great, no problem. I'm on my way. So bailiff comes to the house. Ding dong. Yes, hello. Yeah, well, I'm here to take your house away. Huh? I have a judgment against you from the court. A judge so and so signed this paperwork and says I can take your house from you. At that point, you need to get mad, but not aggressive. Mad at the fact that you are being subjected to arbitrary interference in your life. At that point, that is where it is kicking in. You've come to me arbitrarily with a judgment from a judge saying that I'm under obligation and I have to consent to this. There is no obligation for me to consent, and I do not have to consent, and I will not consent. They want to remove you or take your home from you through their arbitrary judgment. When they come at you with their judgments, their arbitrary judgments, they're not actually coming at the human being or the man and woman. They're coming against the legal person, the artificial person, and hoping that you cannot make a distinction and that you do not know what's going on. So when they do try to come at you with these paperworks, you need to claim you're interfering with me under Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12, and the Covenant on Civil Rights and Freedoms Protection, Article 17. It states that you cannot be arbitrarily interfered with, your privacy, your home, your family, or your correspondence. So the fact that they are trying to arbitrarily remove your home, for example, because we're using this as an example, they have no right to be doing this. It's only if you consent and give in because you're afraid and you don't understand what's going on. Now here comes the bank and the bailiff. They're coming to your home with their judgment, their arbitrary judgment against you, saying we're going to seize your home because you took a mortgage and you are not able to pay it now, and now we're going to take it back. Well, the Criminal Code of Canada, Article 39, it's going to show you this whole operation here. It's going to show you expressed in here in Canada, in the laws itself, the fact that they can't remove you from your home. Even if they come with a judgment, their arbitrary judgment. You have every right to stand and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not submitting to that, and I'm not going to give in to that. And some will be saying that at this point, well, they're going to send police, and the police are going to come. Well, you know what? Police have no business doing any work for a bailiff, or a collection agency, or any type of business like that. The Criminal Code of Canada, Article 39. Defense with claim of right. Everyone who is in peaceable possession of personal property under a claim of right, and everyone acting under his authority is protected from criminal responsibility for defending that possession, even against a person entitled by law to possession of it, if he uses no more force than is necessary. The Criminal Code of Canada, Article 39, it talks about that everyone who is in peaceable possession of property under a claim of right. Now some might stop here and say, oh, the claim of right, the one we got to send to the government. It's not what I'm talking about. Everyone who is in peaceable possession of property under a claim of right, well, everyone has that right already. Because in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12, everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily subjected to interference. So you don't have to go send a whole bunch of paperwork. Yeah, it's good too, but if you're put in a situation where you got to deal with this physical to physical, here you go. I'm claiming my right now, sir. You're coming with your paperwork and you're trying to take my house away. And I'm claiming my right that you cannot arbitrarily interfere with me with your little signature on your paper. You do not scare me, sir. I understand my rights as a human being. In the Criminal Code of Canada, Article 39, when you're holding your property under a claim of right, you are protected from criminal responsibility for defending that possession or that property. So if you take a stance and say, I'm a human, this is my hard energy that went into this hole, and I refuse to relinquish it. I refuse to give in to your arbitrary interference in my life. I have the right to be free. I have the right not to be acknowledged as a legal person. I'm invoking all these rights. I'm claiming all these rights. And you better watch the actions that you take with me here on out. Now, the rest of that law says that you are entitled to defend your possession even against a person entitled by law to the possession of it. So, how can a person get the entitlement by law to the possession of it? Well, they're going to come with their judgment. They're going to come with their arbitrary judgment signed by another person, saying that they have the right to your possession. And we're going to come here and take it. Now get out. Now you have the right to defend that. Now you want me to tell you how to defend that? It has nothing to do with guns and weapons. Don't even answer the door. Close the door. And if they proceed to come into your house or to try and come into your house, call the peace officer and invoke your rights before the peace officer. And if the bailiff came, for example, to try and possess your property under this whole operation of law where they're playing games with you and making you fearful over these judgments, if they've come to your house now with the bailiff and the police have shown up, well then start to invoke your rights with those police officers. First of all, inform them that they don't have any business being there to enforce a bank that's collecting on a judgment, because this is bailiff's work and collection agency work. And then invoke there as peace officers and say, I have rights that are expressed as in for the human being. Would you like me to share those rights? Because right now they're trying to yoke me to a legal person and operate upon me civilly. And I have no obligation to do that. And I ask you to protect me in this situation. And there's an obligation there for the peace officer to act on your behalf. Because when you choose to stand as everyone, and you choose to not give in to these arbitrary demands or arbitrary interference, this is when you start drawing the line. So the peace officer that might show up with the bailiff, because usually that's what they do. They call the police and they try to intimidate you, and you think that, well, if I don't listen and if I don't give in here to these demands, then the police are going to force me and arrest me. According to the police acts, they have no business being there. Nevertheless, since they are there, you want to use their role. You want to say, Mr. Peace Officer, I need your help here, because I am a human and I do have common law rights. And as you see, I'm standing under the Criminal Code Article 39 right now. And I'm declaring this property belongs to me. I'm claiming it under a claim of right with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I'm saying this is mine. Now I'm invoking your protection to help me to stop this. Because this guy here has got a judgment from a public side. And it has nothing to do with me. It's from a corporation. It's from a judge. It's arbitrarily done. And on top of that, there's no constitution here in Quebec. So all this is de facto. And I'm not submitting to it. And I'm telling you right now that I'm invoking my human rights. And as such, you are under obligation to protect me. Now tell this joker to hit the road before I have to tell him to hit the road. Or, you understand what I mean? Hopefully it never comes to that, but that's your right in law. That's your right.